This video will continue the study of various types of controls that aid in the enhancement of the user experience for your travel agency app. Start with the map control to view information on a map. As part of the services offered by the travel agency, there's a list of restaurants for each city, including directions and a rating for each restaurant. To solve this requirement, you import an XPZ file with the restaurant transaction, the restaurant data provider that will automatically load the data, and the photos of restaurants that will be included in the KB. The XPZ will also add the country flag attribute to the country transaction, and the images of each country's flag to the KB. When you open the restaurant transaction, you'll see that, in addition to the regular data, like identifier, name, photo, address, country, and city, the attribute restaurant geolocation of the geolocation domain type is also included for geolocation, as well as one of the numeric type called restaurant rating for the rating, and another one of the Boolean type called restaurant is open for indicating whether the restaurant is open or not. To view the restaurant data in your app, create the View Restaurants panel, set it up as main, and include it in a grid with the attributes restaurant photo, restaurant name, restaurant address, city name, and country name. Then modify the grid design for the photo to appear on the left. And to the right, insert a table as separator. To the right of this table, insert another table where you'll move the rest of the attributes. We'll adjust the properties of the grid table for the columns to occupy 400 dips and 100% respectively. And we also adjust the row style property with value 400 dips. The grid that shows the list of restaurants should not appear in a standard manner, but rather showing locations, or pins, on a map, since the geolocation of each restaurant, longitude and latitude, is available. To that end, use the grid's control type property and select Maps. Control type is a property of some controls that affects the way in which the control is shown and used. Depending on the type selected, different specific properties will be displayed for each type in order to be configured. Now, in the Location Attribute property, we select the Restaurant Geolocation attribute, and we execute the panel View Restaurants to see it in action. As you'll see, a map is shown with a number of pins indicating geolocation points, in this case, with the location of each restaurant. When you click on a pin in the map, you'll see that the element selected is shown, with data on the restaurant and with the design you defined in the grid. Going back to the grid's properties, you'll see that selecting the control type property in Maps enables a series of properties that may be set up in order to change the map type: standard, satellite, or hybrid, the pin's image, the initial zoom, and so on, and thus customize the map's appearance. Now consider the rating control for numeric attributes that allows you to assign a rating from a configurable range. Remember that you have the restaurant rating attribute of the numeric type and length 4. In this case, you'll see the value entered by the user as a rating in stars for the restaurant rating attribute, from 1 to 5 stars, depending on the attribute's numeric value. So, drag the restaurant rating attribute to the grid table, below the other attributes, and assign its label position property as none. Select the attribute and check its properties, and you'll see that the controls of the attribute or variable types include the control type property to be configured, varying the default behavior. The control types available will depend on the type of controlled data. Selecting the value rating as control type of the attribute will enable properties to indicate the maximum star value. In this case, leave the default value as 5, and the increase to reach the maximum value from value 1, which by default will be 1 at a time. When the user selects 2 stars in editing a restaurant, the value stored will be 2 and the maximum will be 5. Also note that, in design time, the attribute restaurant rating is visually seen as a stars bar on the grid. Execute to view this. You'll see that, for each restaurant, you can view its grading in a number of yellow stars, according to the value stored in the restaurant rating attribute. For example, the Kai restaurant has a rating of 3 stars, and the restaurant Le Cinq has 4 stars. And lastly, see the use of the switch control you have available to use with Boolean attributes for modeling on and off functionalities. To show, for each restaurant, whether it's open or not, you have the restaurant is open attribute of the Boolean type, which stores that information. Add the restaurant is open attribute to the grid below the stars, and leave the label in its default caption and position. Now select the attribute, and in its control type property, select the value SD_switch. You'll see that the appearance on the grid changed to an on-off button, and now you have available several properties to customize it. Leave the default values and execute the panel. Note that for each restaurant, now you have the chance of knowing whether it's open or not at the time of the query. In this case, you cannot edit these values, because to do so, you should execute the travel agency's back office. This video showed how to change the appearance of a grid or the appearance of attributes. There are many more types of controls that can be used in your apps, as shown on screen, to enhance the user experience of the travel agency application. You may also use the controls available on the toolbar and even design your own controls, as it will be shown in another video.